There is a file in the National Park Service personnel archives that most people will never see. It does not list injuries. It does not list misconduct. It does not list illness. It lists rangers who walked away from their posts, mid-shift, mid-patrol, sometimes mid-sentence, and never came back to explain why. No resignation letter, no forwarding address. In some cases, no final transmission logged with dispatch. Just gone. The parks are still open. The trails are still marked. But the people who knew them best, the ones who walked those trails every single day, decided one morning that they would not go back. Tonight we look at 5 of them. Welcome to the faint whisper, where missing person files don't end. They echo. Case 1. Kalder Voss had worked the northern sector of the Bridger-Teton wilderness for 11 years. He was known as precise, methodical, the kind of ranger who filed incident reports in complete sentences and logged every trail condition with timestamps down to the minute. He lived alone in a small cabin just outside the park boundary. He had no family nearby. His co-workers described him as quiet, but dependable, the sort of person you trusted without needing to think about it. On the morning of October 14th, he radioed Station 9 at 6:04 a.m. to confirm he was beginning his scheduled patrol of the northern loop. That was the last confirmed transmission from Ranger Voss. By noon, when he had not radioed his midpoint check-in, his supervisor drove to the northern trailhead to look for his truck. It was there. Engine cold. Keys still in the ignition. His pack was on the passenger seat. Fully loaded, never removed. His radio was on the dashboard, still powered on, set to the correct channel. He had left the truck and walked into the forest without taking a single piece of equipment with him. Search teams covered the northern loop within the day. They found his boot prints on the main trail heading northeast. The prints were normal, even stride, no sign of rushing, for approximately 3/4 of a mile. Then the print stopped. Not at a stream, not at a rock face, not at any natural break in terrain. They stopped in the middle of a flat, open section of trail, both feet planted, facing north. And then, nothing. No divergence into the brush, no sign of a struggle, no secondary impressions. The ground simply ran out of him. A motion-activated trail camera positioned 1 mile north of his last known footprints captured a single image at 6:47 a.m. The timestamp puts it 43 minutes after his radio check-in. The image shows a figure walking north on the trail, at a distance, facing away from the camera. The build and clothing match Ranger Voss exactly. The problem is this. To reach that camera's location from where his truck was parked, in 43 minutes at any realistic pace, is not physically possible. That terrain requires a minimum of 2 hours on foot. Rangers measured it 4 times. The math does not change. Kalder Voss has never been found. His cabin was emptied by the county after 18 months. His co-workers said almost nothing to the press. One of them, a woman who had worked alongside him for 6 years, gave a single quote to a local reporter. She said, "He knew something about that section of trail that the rest of us didn't. I think he finally went to look." She quit her post 3 months later. Case 2. Maren Sollis was 29 years old when she accepted a position on the overnight patrol rotation in the eastern block of Shoshone National Forest. She had transferred from a smaller park in Montana. Her evaluation records described her as sharp, composed under pressure, and highly observant. She had been on the Shoshone rotation for 7 months when things changed. According to her patrol partner, Owen Trace, the change happened over the course of a single night, mid-February of the same year. On February 11th, Sollis and Trace completed the first half of their overnight route without incident. Around 2 a.m., Sollis stopped walking. She stood on the trail and stared into the trees to the west. Trace asked her what she was looking at. She did not answer right away. When she did, she said, "Something is counting." He asked what she meant. She shook her head. They continued the patrol. Trace noted in his personal log that she did not speak again for the remaining 4 hours of the shift. Over the following 3 weeks, Sollis began arriving at the ranger station early, sometimes more than an hour before shift. She would sit in her truck and write. Trace saw her once through the window. He said it looked like numbers. Long columns of numbers down the margin of a yellow notepad. When he asked about it, she told him she was tracking something in the patrol data. Intervals, she called them. She said there was a pattern in the times when the radio interference hit. Always between 2 and 2:15 a.m. Always in the same half-mile stretch of trail. She had documented it going back 4 months. Nobody else had noticed because nobody else had looked. On March 3rd, Sollis recorded the interference on a personal device she had started carrying. She played the recording for Trace the following day. Beneath the static, you could hear something that a sound technician later described as structured. Not random signal decay, not equipment noise. A rhythm, consistent spacing, repeating. The technician said it reminded him of code, but it was not any code system he recognized. It repeated on the same interval, every 15 seconds, for the full duration of the recording. He could not identify the source. He said the frequency did not match any licensed transmitter in the region. On March 7th, Maren Sollis did not come in for her shift. She had texted Trace at 11:42 p.m. the night before. The message read, "I figured out the interval. I know what it's counting down to." No follow-up. No call. She was gone from her apartment. Her car was in the lot. Her notepad was on the kitchen table. Every page filled. Investigators photographed the notepad. No one has publicly explained what the columns of numbers meant. The file remains open. Case 3. Desmond Hale was a 14-year veteran of the Ouachita Forest Service. He patrolled the southern vehicle corridors, the fire roads and maintenance tracks that run through the lower sections of the park. He knew those roads the way some people know their own house, without thinking. His supervisor called him unflappable. His wife told investigators he had never once come home from a shift looking shaken, until the last 6 weeks of his employment. Hale began filing internal reports in late September, noting that a stretch of fire road in the southwestern sector was behaving, his word, incorrectly. Specifically, he reported that on 3 separate patrols, he drove the same segment of road and arrived at a point he had already passed. Not due to a missed turn, not due to a road split. He was on a straight, single-lane maintenance track, and it looped him back to a point he had driven through 20 minutes earlier. His vehicle's odometer confirmed he had traveled additional miles. The fuel gauge confirmed it. But he was back at the same yellow marker post, at the same curve, looking at the same fallen tree on the same embankment. His supervisor drove the road with him. Nothing unusual occurred. The road ran straight and ended normally. Hale returned alone 2 nights later. He brought a camera and ran it on the dashboard the entire drive. The footage shows him reaching the yellow marker post. Then the video cuts. Not a glitch, not a power failure. A clean cut. One frame it is daytime. The next frame it is daytime again, but the clock in the corner has advanced by 41 minutes. He is back at the start of the road. He did not appear distressed on camera. He sat still for a long time. Then he turned the truck around and drove home. He filed one final report on October 6th. In it, he calculated that based on his odometer readings across 3 separate drives, he had traveled the same 1.7-mile stretch of road a total of 11 times in a single patrol, without ever exiting it on either end. Total mileage logged, 18.7 miles. Total road available, 1.7 miles. He concluded the report with one sentence: "I don't believe this road wants to be patrolled." Desmond Hale submitted his resignation the following morning. He left an envelope on his supervisor's desk. Inside was his badge, his keys, and a handwritten note with 2 words: "Don't drive it." His wife said he never explained what happened. She said he slept with the light on for the rest of his life. Case 4. Priya Anand worked as both a field ranger and a secondary dispatch operator for the Sequoia Corridor, a dual role that required her to be on radio communication for most of her shift. Dispatch supervisors said she had the best radio voice on the team. Clear, unhurried. Nothing rattled her. She had been in the role for 3 years when, in August, she started asking questions about old transmissions. Anand requested access to archived radio logs going back 8 years, specifically logs from the eastern ridgeline sectors. Her stated reason was a routine quality review. What she found, according to a coworker she confided in, was a voice. Not a ranger, not a hiker calling for help. A voice that appeared on the frequency at irregular intervals over several years, always in the early morning hours, always transmitting the same sequence of words. She would not tell her coworker what those words were. She said, "If I say it out loud, I think I start expecting to hear it." Over the following 2 weeks, Anand began monitoring the eastern frequency during her dispatch shifts, running it alongside the primary channel. She kept a log. On August 19th, at 3:08 a.m., she heard it live. Her coworker, seated beside her at the console, described her reaction. She did not panic. She removed her headset very slowly, set it on the desk, stood up, and walked to the window. She stood there without speaking for approximately 4 minutes. Then she returned to her station, picked up the headset, and finished her shift without mentioning it again. Her coworker reviewed the console log afterward. The transmission had lasted 9 seconds. It had originated from a frequency assigned to a ranger outpost that had been decommissioned and physically demolished 6 years earlier. The equipment was gone. The structure was gone. There was no transmitter at that location. There had not been one for 6 years. And yet the signal was strong, clean, no interference, as if the station were still there, somewhere, broadcasting from a place that no longer existed in any form that could be visited. Priya Anand resigned by email on August 21st. She gave no reason. She has not responded to any contact from the Park Service, former co-workers, or journalists who later covered the story. The archived radio logs she accessed were reviewed by Park Service officials after her departure. Her supervisor confirmed the logs existed. He would not confirm what was on them. He retired early the following spring. Case 5. Corvin Stahl was the most decorated ranger in his district. 22 years of service, 3 commendations for wilderness rescue operations. He had brought people out of situations that other rangers had marked as unrecoverable. He knew Olympics backcountry the way most people know their own face. He kept a personal field journal, handwritten, spiral-bound, 1 per year. His family had 17 of them, covering nearly every year of his service. The 18th journal was different. Stahl had been reporting elevated unease in his patrol sector for several months, not in official reports, but in the journal. He described a feeling he could not name, a quality in the forest that had changed. Not the landscape itself, not animal behavior, not weather patterns. Just a feeling that the space around him had become attentive. His word, attentive. Like something in the trees had started paying close attention to where he walked. He wrote, "I have been coming here for 22 years, and I have never felt watched. Now I feel it every shift. I don't know what changed. I don't think I changed." 3 weeks before his disappearance, Stahl stopped taking the main trails. He began walking the boundary zones, the margins between designated forest and unmarked terrain. He told no one why. In the journal, he wrote about finding marks. Not carvings, not graffiti. Marks in the soil and bark that he described as deliberate but unrecognizable. He photographed some of them. The photographs were found in his cabin. In every image, there is a mark on a tree or a stone that is clearly intentional, symmetrical, repeated, but does not match any symbol used by the Park Service or any known trail notation system. On his last patrol, Stahl walked a boundary circuit he had described in detail in the journal. The route was reconstructed by investigators based on his entries. It covered approximately 8 miles of terrain. On fresh snow, in conditions that would have preserved every step clearly, search teams found no evidence of his passage along any portion of that 8-mile route. He had walked it. The journal entry from that morning was dated and time-stamped. His radio had pinged 2 towers along the route, confirming his physical presence. But the snow held no trace of him. 8 miles of fresh fallen snow, not a single print. The last entry in his journal was written the night before he vanished. It was calm, almost peaceful. It read, "I think the forest here is older than our maps say it is. I think it remembers things we don't. Tonight I am going to stop walking the edges of it and walk into it instead. I want to know if it recognizes me. Corvin Stahl was reported missing the following morning. He has never been found. His family donated 17 of his journals to a nature archive. The 18th, the last one, they kept. They have not said why. 5 rangers, 5 different parks, 5 different years. And yet, when you lay the case files side by side, something comes into focus. Each of them was experienced. Each of them had spent years in the same territory. None of them were new to the wilderness. None of them were the type to panic or fabricate. Each case involved a moment of recognition, a shift from routine patrol to something they could not classify, followed by a period of documentation. They all tried to measure it, record it, make it make sense. And each of them reached a point where the documentation stopped and the silence began. There is one more detail. In the Voss file, in the Sollis file, and in the Stahl journal, there is a phrase that appears unprompted in each of their final written records. Not the same words exactly, but the same idea. Each of them described a feeling that the land was aware of them. Not dangerous, not hostile, aware. Like the wilderness had been watching long enough that it had learned their routines, their patterns, the exact hours they walked, the exact routes they took. Kalder Voss covered the same northern loop for 11 years. Maren Sollis tracked the same interference window for 4 months. Desmond Hale drove the same fire road for 14 years. Priya Anand monitored the same frequency for 3 years. Corvin Stahl walked the same boundary circuit for 2 decades. Every single one of them made themselves predictable. And then something, in whatever form it takes in those specific sections of forest, on those specific roads, on those specific radio frequencies, something noticed. The parks are still open. The trails are still maintained. New rangers walk them now. Rangers who do not yet know the patterns. Rangers who have not been in those places long enough to become familiar. But give it time. If you are a park ranger, a trail worker, a wilderness guide, or anyone who walks the same stretch of land every day, at the same hours, in the same direction, pay attention to the moment you stop feeling alone. Not threatened, not in danger, just observed. Because that moment, in every case we covered tonight, was not the beginning of the mystery, it was the end of it. The files on these 5 rangers remain open. No arrests, no confirmed sightings, no remains recovered, no explanation that the Park Service has seen fit to share publicly. If you have a case that belongs on this list, a story, a file, a detail that doesn't line up, you know where to bring it. This is The Faint Whisper. Subscribe if you're still with us. Leave the light on.